speak, but please turn them back off again afterwards. Could I please ask Democratic Services to mute everyone and begin the recording? Okay, I believe that's started. So good afternoon, welcome to the Transformation, Commercialisation and Corporate Services Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 14th of September 2021. Welcome, Leader. Nice to see you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the authority. So if we go to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
Councillor Bill Smith, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, and item number 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Lee Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have to declare interest in item agenda 3 as I work for the Leisure Trust. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, so moving on to item number 3. This is the report on the Welsh Public Library Standards, pages 6 to 30. This has been brought today because the Council are required to review the status of the Welsh Public Libraries assessment forms prior to their submission to Welsh Government. The Welsh Public Library Standards are the measure by which the Minister with responsibility for libraries can make a decision about their compliance with the Statutory Libraries and Museums Act 1964. And for today's meeting, the primary goal for members is to assess the paperwork submitted for review by the Head of Library Services and review its content, identify the impact of COVID-19 on services and explore the plans for recovery. So with that, if I take you to recommendations 2.1, and the report requires ratification through a scrutiny process to be a final submission to Welsh Government. Therefore, the recommendations are as follows: that 2.2, the report is accepted and ratified as a full return. Okay, so with that in mind, if I could go over to welcome firstly to Jane. And Jane does a brief introduction of the report for me. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. As you can see from the report, for those of you who've seen these reports before, it is a much reduced report for the period that's covered in that report, which is mainly March 19 or April 2020 to 2021. Libraries were closed for much of that time under the auspices of the lockdowns that we were in. In looking at that, Welsh Government took down the number of indicators that we were required to report on as an authority. This happened across Wales. This was done in discussion with all of the heads of library services across Wales. The report has gone in because it has to be in with Welsh Government by June. So they have seen sight of this report now. Essentially, this report won't be measured in the ways the previous reports were. So there'll be no sort of league table as there's been in the past when we have the report back from Welsh Government. And what's been talked about is producing a amalgamated all Wales report for authorities for this year. We were required to do some of the normal things, which are, how do libraries contribute, what do libraries plan to do to start to recover, and things like the case studies about what work actually did go on when we were allowed to do it, because as you'll all be aware, there was the long period of initial lockdown, there was a local lockdown, then we went into lockdown again, so there were very small windows of actual face-to-face contact with anyone within library services. However, a number of things did keep going on. You'll see from the report that our digital services have gone up, as we would expect to, and you will see there are real low dips in any physical visits. which, you know, is nobody's fault and is nobody's, and nobody will be surprised by it because we were closed by government mandate. So I'm happy to answer any questions, because I think really that is its entirety. It is a very much reduced report this year.
Thank you, Jane. And it's lovely to see that the library's open again. Really
Yes, it is.
Okay. So with that, we go over to questions if everyone's happy to. Gethin, you got your hand up? Clive?
Oh, right, sorry. I'll start even if I don't have my hand up. Thanks so much. First, I'd compliment you on the report. I mean, clearly it's the first time I've seen the report, a lot of details in there. And I know from being a former officer that it takes a disproportionate amount of time to complete. And any questions I ask is done within the context of how well it has been written and how I understood lots of things. We had a brief meeting before, and one of the concerns I was expressing was to try and understand, for the benefit of the councillors, partly my ignorance mostly, how the budget works within it, even though perhaps the questions are not there, just understanding whether you are having sufficient budget, whether it's content, and really moving on from there, do you need more money really? Because was the issue has been narrowed, and if you were, what would you do? It's the other point I was making was you answered it in part that the comparators clearly can't be in place now, but is it possible perhaps at a later date to have a copy of previous comparators, because that effectively gives a target for members to decide and understand how well the service is doing. I mean, nobody's suggesting it's not doing extremely well, but simply to understand the targets. Are they meaningful compared with others, how the others are doing? Is it worth members acquiring some ideas from elsewhere to move forward? There's a whole bundle of things there. It might well be you could well come back at me and say, well, I'll send you details for another day. Fine, I'll accept that readily, because the report is different from the question I'm asking.
So I think for clarity, Jane, I think it was more around a question of value for money in terms of the budget, because I know that we don't want to, the report isn't about digging down into the detail of the budget between council and library, but I think Gethin's point is more around, are we confident that the budget is sufficient? Is it good value for money and that sort of thing? And also around comparisons. And I believe now that the conversation started to flow, am I right in thinking that those things would have been in last year's, Jane, if I remember rightly, weren't they?
Yes, you are correct. All of the comparators are available on the Welsh Government website. So for previous years and previous returns, they're all there. Merthyr has been performing traditionally within around the top 4 to 5 authorities within Wales. We do have the lowest budget. As for value for money, we've got one of the lowest spends per head of population because of our low budgets. We work very, very hard to ensure that all of the services that we provide to the public, they don't see the level of underfunding, if that's a way of putting it. You know, we are by no means alone in having low budgets. Libraries have suffered for that for many years. We understand the impacts of COVID will continue to have impacts on our budgets. And as a previous boss of mine used to tell me, libraries have been run on a shoestring for about 1 million years. It is no reflection of the service and the level of service we can provide, because I think most councillors who've used our services will attest that, you know, our staff are exemplary. They are an amazing staff. I cannot speak highly enough of them. Without those staff, you know, we wouldn't have the service levels that we do. And, you know, in an ideal world, we require roughly double the amount that we currently have in order to reach our staffing levels, which we haven't reached through the entirety of the framework that we're working to at the moment, and are unlikely to reach those levels. There has been some comparison within the report around the amount of money being spent on staff as opposed to other areas. And you'll see that that looks a lot higher this year, but that looks a lot higher for all of the reasons the COVID has hit us with this year. We have had a lot less maintenance and we've had a lot less repairs because the buildings have been closed and our staff have been furloughed. We have kept 100% furlough for our staff, to ensure that we keep those amazing staff that we've got with us. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so Councillor Jones, if you, I'll come to you in a second. Gethin, did you want to ask any other questions before we move on to Councillor Jones?
I think again, it's been touched upon really. It's all to do with the volunteers element. You've made the point of it being understaffed, and really it's a question perhaps for another day for the detail of how many volunteers do you have, how many hours do they work in a week or a month, and what would happen really to the service if suddenly they decided not to be volunteers anymore. I mean, it's important for the councillors to be aware of that, because it's important for them to understand where the holes might be if things go wrong, because the great quote comes from Manic Street Preachers, and that libraries give us power, and it's something they have on stage on many occasions, and this is something which has allowed many people to succeed. So it's a question of volunteers, the importance they need, and what would happen if they disappeared. And possibly that's a comment for another day, though I just make it in front of everybody so councillors can be aware of it.
If I can just come back with that. We've got very limited volunteering opportunities at the moment because of the impacts of COVID. We recognise that we have to treat our volunteers very, very fairly, and operating in the current restrictions that we are, we've taken the decision to stop our volunteering programme at the moment. Our volunteering programme we use to add value to the services. So we've had volunteers in the past who've done children's activities. We've had volunteers who've done local and family history projects with us. But what we have to be very, very mindful of is those volunteers cannot take the place of our paid staff. Our paid staff are those professional people that we rely on day in, day out. But our volunteers are very important to us, and it is something we'll be looking at now as we start our sort of recovery back into a post-COVID world, whatever that means for us and however soon that is.
Okay, so I think if that's all, Gethin, we can go to, and I'll sum up at the end then, just to make sure we haven't missed anything. But Clive Jones, Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One I've asked before, but for the benefit of Gethin and our additional member of the committee from the Youth Forum, you did touch upon it, Jane, about the staff in there, but for quite some time you've been down at least one qualified librarian, and perhaps you can remind us all the number of qualified librarians you should have there, and how many you've actually got, and how many years you've been without the full quota of qualified librarians.
Yeah, can I come in on that, Jane, just before you answer? Only because I was going to ask the same question, because every year we visit it, don't we? And every year you explain to us the, that it's sort of it's a very, very difficult vocation to recruit into. That there's very few people going down that road career-wise. We've discussed before about internal qualifications and training up the staff we've already got potentially. So I wondered whether, it's exactly the same question as Clive, but more around, have we been able to make any further progression with that, and or is there anything in the pipeline to try and change that?
Yeah, it is a problem for us right along. Although we don't have the correct number of staff or the correct number of qualified staff, in post. You know, we, as I said earlier, we haven't met that standard for the entirety of this framework. And in order to allow us to get to that level, we'd need an investment of around another £150,000 to £200,000 in staffing, you know, which is a big investment. Prior to coming to Trust, we had 32 members of staff, and the year before we came over, our staffing went down to 17 as part of efficiencies that were made. As I say, we've done an amazing job with the staff we've got, and they are fantastic at keeping the service levels up. But we are struggling without that qualified librarian as well. It's myself and Sean Anthony are the only 2 qualified librarians now within the service. And we had started to look at what the opportunities would be for internal members of staff last time that I spoke to you around this issue. And since COVID, to be perfectly honest, no further progress has been made with that. It was a very difficult time to try and get anything. All the universities were closed down, you know, so actually trying to find that possible route for some of our staff members hasn't been able, we haven't been able to do it. We are sort of still looking at it and still looking at the best thing, and we're looking at a service review just to make sure that the right people are in the right posts, because sometimes it isn't about a qualified librarian. And I speak as somebody who did my degree late. I came into the service and did my degree to allow me to become a professional librarian, but I do recognise that that may not be what we need. You know, COVID has proven the impact of digital services in allowing people to keep connected. We've got a massive issue within Merthyr around literacy and digital literacy. And again, I think I did touch on this the last time we met. That is where I see a professional person come into a role now, is to support that digital element of what we do, because it's become so much more important. And, you know, I think people have realised that importance over the last year and a bit.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Clive?
Yeah, can I just pursue that a bit, because you give us the figures that when it became a trust, am I right, in the first year you went down to 17? Is that the year that you went down to 17?
No, it was the year before.
Your year before?
It was year before. Going into
Right.
trust, we had 17 members.
Right. Does that include the vacant qualified librarians position?
Yeah.
And are there any other vacant posts? So you're down to 16, and there are 16 staff there at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, with the best will in the world, you are completely punching above your weight. I'll come back to that in the comments, Chair. My other question, Jane, is on page 30. There's a whole paragraph there, and I think you're referring to the library facility that was based in the Merthyr Leisure Centre, the Redicar Leisure Centre as we know it, and obviously that stopped for all sorts of reasons. But you say in the first paragraph there, extended periods of closure and poor winter weather has also impacted massively on one of the buildings, and there is current work going on to assess the viability of reopening at another building to ensure the service isn't lost to an area. So you're hoping to replace the library service that was based in the Merthyr Leisure Centre. Do I presume from that you're looking at another building in the Merthyr Tydfil area? Is that correct?
No, it isn't. Sorry. The building that we are looking at is in the Treharris area. We've got some severe issues within our library at Treharris. and we're currently working on how we mitigate that delivery of a service into another venue. You know.
Right. I understand there are some maintenance, well, several maintenance issues about the building there that's been occupied and used as a Triaris library for decades.
Yeah.
So what you're informing the committee now is that because of the cost of maintaining a building, and I understand there are probably repairs needed to the boiler system down there. That's one thing that's been mentioned. You're looking for a suitable alternative premises in Triaris to base the library.
Yeah. Yes.
And,
yeah.
And so far you haven't found one, is that correct?
We are in the process of planning. You know, until we're ready to go out with our plan in its entirety. You know, I don't really want to comment further on that one, because really we need to get all of our ducks in a row and ensure that what we're giving is a comparable service. You know, we are very, very aware that the service down there is something that is really valued. So we just need to make sure that we've got our comparable service and our ducks in a row before
Right.
we move forward with it, to be honest.
Right. Just a clarification now, when you say planning, do you mean that one of the aspects would be applying for planning permission to use an alternative?
No, it would just be our internal planning to
Okay.
ensure that we can move the service as it stands elsewhere.
And when do you think that will come to fruition?
We're hoping within the next month now.
All right, as soon as that.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. I believe Alan Owen has got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies for being slightly late joining the meeting. Some clarification, Jane, if I can, and we can explore this in our next contract meeting. The reduction in the library service staff on transfer, you said from 30, was it
32.
32?
It was the year prior to transfer.
Down to 17. Was that all voluntary redundancy? Because I don't remember the council making any redundancies at that time.
No, we managed to redeploy several people internally, but it wasn't all it was a reduction. I can send you the paperwork if.
Well, that's fine. We can explore it. Was that reduction due to people not wanting to go to the trust or reducing the costs of the trust?
No, it was efficiencies that we were asked to make at that point.
Was that to lower the contract cost of the trust?
I've no idea. I wasn't involved in those discussions at that point. They were efficiencies made and I think they were started prior to me taking over as a principal librarian even.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just before we go to, I don't think there's any more questions. I can't see any more hands up. So I'll take that as nobody else has got any questions unless you want to quickly pop your hand up. No, there doesn't seem to be any hands. Oh, Claire, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Reading the background papers, there's one section there which explains the kind of additional duties that staff undertook during the pandemic and how that attracted some new members. I'm wondering if you've got any kind of feedback from those new people who joined as a result of other services they were receiving. And also within the background papers, it talks about sort of consulting with users. Does the library service go out to sort of members of the community who aren't currently engaging with the libraries to sort of ascertain why that may be?
Yeah, we haven't done a non-user survey for a couple of years now. Obviously, COVID's had an impact, but as part of the Welsh Public Library Standards, we have to consult with our users once every 3 years. But as part of our management agreement with the local authority, that's every year. So every year we've done a user consultation, but as I say, we haven't done a non-user consultation for a little bit of time now. We are due to redo one. And, you know, there were plans in the pipeline prior to COVID, you know, but to be perfectly honest, like so many things now, that's taken a back seat as we concentrate on that recovery and bringing people back into library services.
Claire, was there anything else?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Jane.
So, Jane, just to sum up on the questions, is that everybody now with questions? Okay, so just to sum up on the questions, Jane, our co-optee, Gethin, he was the gent who asked the questions at the very beginning. Obviously, he's new to the committee, and he had lots of really good questions, and he's very curious to know about a lot about the stuff that we would have covered in previous meetings. So, Jane, what I'd like to do is send you over the questions from Gethin, and then, you know, if you could sort of, because some of them will need you to look into facts and figures and things.
Yeah.
So if you would be willing, I'll send that over to you, and maybe then you can sort of have a little email exchange with Gethin just to bring him up to date.
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
Okay?
That's fab, yeah.
Is that okay, Gethin?
That's fine. What I ask is don't spend a disproportionate amount of time doing that, because you've got enough things to do. And I think I've made the points just for you to bear in the mind, the back of your head, some of them are. Don't waste too much time on them. Just do it. If they're quick, great. If they're not, I'll readily accept that. And just compliment you on how well you've survived, really. And just thank the chair for letting me ask the questions.
No worries. Okay, lovely. So with that, we shall go to comments. Okay, so Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Having read the report, and we were all thrust into a different world on the 23rd of March last year. And in fact, we're all still living in that new world. And what's impressed me, and this goes for all local authority staff, but the library staff as well in particular, is that to me, it was virtually at the snap of the fingers that stopped work, and immediately they were talking to each other to see what they could do to help out with all sorts of things, because there were people who needed food parcels delivered. There were school children who needed food and meals delivered. There was the very important assistance with the vaccination centres. I mean, that was up and running in a short space of time, and it's been an exemplar throughout Wales as to how something like that can happen at very short notice. And at the same time, you've had to keep an eye on keeping the library service ticking over. It is, as you say, matters have changed. We're more into the digital world now than there's ever been. And then at the same time, the background, we've got a huge problem with bringing a lot of people on board that weren't used to the digital world. And that's a job and a half in itself. So I for one, I mean, I've got constituents who have expressed to me how grateful they are with the service that you've been providing. You know, you've had to change because members of the public couldn't go into the buildings, but you've still been able to accommodate them. My family members are also members of the library. I'm not a member at the moment. I'm trying to find time to become a member, and perhaps I should do so at some stage. But I just want to compliment you, and the fact that you're running this service with 16 members of staff is a tribute to them all, and you in particular, Jane. So I just think that in the last 18 months, you've done a marvellous job with the finance and resources that you've been afforded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yeah, just to say, Jane, I don't think, are there any other comments before I sum up? No? Okay, just to say, Jane, it would be lovely if, like, you know, absolutely mirror what Councillor Jones has said. You know, everybody knows I'm a massive fan of the library. My children have been raised being members of the library, taking part in all the different activities. It's always been a huge part of my life, not just now, but certainly when I was growing up. But yeah, so huge fan of the library, and I'm well aware as well, mirroring what Councillor Jones has said in terms of the way that you guys stepped up, you know, to be part of the community in a different way throughout the pandemic. You know, not just providing the books, but also providing other services. And I understand that even like the mobile library as well have sort of done their bit. I know that from knowing Donna. So she's, you know, she's one of our Park Ward residents, Councillor Jones, by the way. She does a sterling job. Yeah, and obviously the online service as well, for that to have kept going. But just as an observation though, Jane, it would be really lovely if we can get back to some sense of normality. It would be really lovely from this time, from now until the next time we see you for the next report next year. And it probably won't even be me then, it'll probably be my successor. But yeah, it would be lovely to see some progression on the training and development side of things. And I totally take your point. You know, it could be that that librarian role sort of naturally dying out, could be for a good reason, but it would be really nice to see that sort of that investment with training and development and succession planning with the staff. It'd be lovely to see that making sort of strides. And yeah, and also like picking up on Claire's point really around the consultation with non-users, that would be really good to see as well, if we were able to make some sort of progression with that as well, because of course the more people we can get into the library and using the services, the better really, isn't it, you know? So and that's it really from my perspective. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming today, and we'll all see you soon, probably in the library.
Probably.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Harvey Jones, did you want to say something?
Yes, very, very quickly. Like Councillor Clive Jones, I'd like to congratulate Jane on what I considered at 1:30 this afternoon, when I got to the end of it, a tremendous report. And I say that for the following reasons. When I started reading the report, which was last night, starting at page 5, I went to page 7 because that's what you were covering in the main. The rest of it is put there basically for information purposes. Okay, I got to the end of page 7 and I thought, well, I'll go back over this tomorrow and, you know, it won't tell me much more than what you already said in the first 3 pages. However, I take that back, because when I started reading from page 9 after lunch and went right through to the end, I came across an immense list of issues that you carry out within the library on behalf of the council to the people of Merthyr Tydfil. And when I read those, I thought the library system is not about issuing books over the counter and taking the payments of people because they're late coming back. It's a lot of other things as well. And when I got to the end of them, I called my wife in to tell her, this was about 2 o'clock, to tell her exactly what it was in the pages that flowed from page 7, all about what the library does for the people of Merthyr Tydfil. And that's why overnight, I think, I have become a big supporter of Merthyr Library, and certainly, as Clive said, the staff of Merthyr Library, because without the staff that you've got there, which is limited, we all know that, we've heard before, you would be struggling. But these staff carried out doing what they've done all the way along, and that to me, if that goes forward to the Welsh government as part of our submission, and I hope it does, they won't have anything to worry about in Merthyr. And you said in your report that in 2019-20, you had a very strong, you were able to complete a strong return for the year. That's going back in 2019-20. I would say, after reading your report today, that
Harvey, your microphone has gone on. Harvey.
Your microphone's off, Mark. Harvey.
of that, did you? You didn't hear it, did you?
Just the end bit. We heard most of it, Councillor Jones.
Okay. So I finish now.
Okay, Clive, you were just putting your hand up because of Harvey's microphone, was it?
I'll put my hand back down now.
Lovely. Okay, that's all then, Jane. Thank you for coming today, and we'll be in touch with those questions from Gethin. And I understand the other co-optee, our other co-optee Claire, would be interested in learning a little bit of background as well. So we'll send them over to you. Thank you, Jane.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, so moving on, we are going on to item number 4, which is on page 31 of your reports. This item is the corporate plan and corporate wellbeing objectives, pages 31 to 40. The council has entered the last year of its current corporate wellbeing plan and must plan the process for development of the next iteration. As previously highlighted, Scrutiny Committee members are key stakeholders in this process. So for today's meeting, I'd like to open discussions around the development process to secure clarity on the process and confirm the role and responsibilities that we as members have in contributing to this process overall. So my understanding is that Councillor Mitten and as leader and Ellis Cooper as CEO will introduce the report, and then Andrew Mogford will attend to support any discussions around the practical development of the process. So if I could just send you to recommendations 2.1, and that is that the judgments and evaluation of this report are noted and debated. And with that, I shall hand over to Ellis and Lisa.
Thank you, Chair, so much. Much appreciated. I mean, obviously, because the key ethos of the plan is about our approach and our engagement, we felt it was important to, yes, work as a double act, if you like, myself and the Chief Executive, and also our Deputy Chief Executive, Alan Owen, as well, with Andrew Mogford, in just setting the scene for you firstly, Chair, if that's okay, as leader, taking you through a couple of slides, and then, as you quite rightly said, opening it up to scrutiny members to see if there are any questions. So, Andrew, if you can go to the next slide. So taking you through the introduction, first of all, obviously the council approved its existing corporate wellbeing plan and our wellbeing objectives at a council meeting back in back on the 26th of July 2017. The plan is reviewed and approved annually, and at the end of a plan, a full review is needed, and then, of course, the plan is subsequently renewed then for another period of time. Next one, Anne. This is done every 5 years at the end of a corporate wellbeing plan to ensure a clear direction of travel is maintained to meet the needs of our communities. The plan was set to end in April 2022, and the Council is set to review its corporate wellbeing plan and wellbeing objectives, and I'll take us through that in just a second. Okay, fire away, and okay, so the original corporate wellbeing plan and wellbeing objectives set us on the scene 2017 to 2022. Engagement and needs assessment informed that current existing corporate plan, and as I said, that was approved back in July 2017. The corporate plan is reviewed each year. After year one, we carried out a lessons learned exercise, and after this, we refocused our wellbeing objectives. And we will review our existing corporate plan and approve it before the before the end of April 2022, obviously to meet our statutory duty. And it's also done in line with the regional wellbeing plan that was published slightly later than our corporate plan, and this was also informed by needs assessments. Engagement, data analysis and consultation. We are working across the region to develop needs assessments to inform our plan. So I think within the body of the report, what you'll see is you've got the RPB and PSB, and Chair, I noted that there are some new colleagues to the scrutiny, so forgive me for all the acronyms. RPB is the Regional Partnership Board, PSB the Public Services Board, and they are currently doing a population needs assessment and a wellbeing assessment, which is due by the end of the year. And of course, both of these will be used to inform our plan. The corporate wellbeing plan and wellbeing objectives will be set for 2022 through to 2027. And we will develop this, as I said, to align with our regional plan. And I'll come on to timelines in a moment, but it's vitally important that we engage with elected members. So we'll have current existing elected members who will be able to inform the plan, but also allowing an opportunity for those elected members who are still here and those who join us after the elections in May 2022.
Okay, Ellis, did you want? Sorry.
Sorry, I'll just finish then. I'll bring the chief exec in. Is that okay, Tan?
Yeah, of course.
And then we'll also have alongside the approval of our regional wellbeing plan at the same time as our local corporate wellbeing plan. Okay, so our proposal is the corporate wellbeing plan, when obviously, as we said, that is due to end April 2022. And by reviewing and approving the existing corporate wellbeing plan by April 2022, just as a reminder, we will meet our duty. And then we've got that preparation window, the corporate wellbeing plan, you know, rather than having it published by April 2022 and then taking that on, we've got that preparation time between April and July to really allow for that engagement. And as I've said, including those elected members as well, but critically to ensure that we have effective consultation with the community and engagement with other parties as well. So next bit, and. So the needs assessments will be conducted across the region and fed into the plan. And of course, critical to the plan as well, forgive me, it was remiss of me not to say, is the RTI, which is our Recovery, Transformation and Improvement plan as well. And the new corporate wellbeing plan can be approved at the same time as the regional plans. So we'll have them both running then consecutively from 2022 through to 2027. So it will be published between July and November 2022. Finally, then, the next steps are to continue to engage with Audit Wales and the Wellbeing of the Future Generations Commissioner's Office. Finalise the planning stage for engagement as we move into those months in 2022. And of course, we'll be using the 10 steps of best practice and focusing especially on those steps 1 to 4 for that stage. And as you know, we agreed to bring this particular report to this scrutiny committee this month, and then subsequently in next year's calendar, Chair. And yes, you said you won't be here, but you never know. But in next year's calendar, then of course Scrutiny will receive the corporate wellbeing plan as well. So what I'd like to do is just hand over and invite in the Chief Executive and also my Deputy Chief Executive before Andrew Mogford takes questions to see if they wish to add anything to the presentation, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. Ellis?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chair. If I start touching on COVID, if I may, obviously there's been a bit of a discussion this afternoon in terms of the issues that we've experienced through going through the pandemic. And from our residents' perspective, there are several reasons that our residents of Merthyr Tydfil and the Heads of Valley region, or the valleys in particular, have been quite hard hit. And the determinants of ill health go hand in hand with the poverty agenda, low literacy. And so the issues that we need to focus on quite clearly coming out the other side of the pandemic, albeit that we're still in the throes of it. So when we eventually do emerge from the pandemic, we really need to focus as an organisation now on addressing these intractable issues for our residents, that of ill health, the low literacy and the poverty agenda, which, as members and scrutiny members, you will be well aware of. So if I touch then back on the RTI plan and how that has led into the wellbeing plan, over the past 2 years, we've got a hell of a lot of clarity in terms of both internally looking at how we address those, or how we are focusing our services on the right things. And we've changed the way we look at from a reactive viewpoint as a local authority to really looking at the medium to long term and the issues we really have to concentrate on, and trying to align our services holistically to try and make these better for the public. So within the RTI plan, you'll be aware, and it comes through into the wellbeing plan, there's a clear prioritisation in response to those issues, improving our education standards, increasing resilience to our social care, and focusing on economic recovery. And in order to do that, we've looked at strengthening our internal governance and being able to continually improve, being efficient, effective and economic with our services. And that will all lead to, hopefully, touch wood, sustainable service provision. And in that way, we can take forward as a local authority and as a council a strong response to those issues that I touched on right at the start for the people and the residents of Merthyr Tydfil. And that's what I just want to convey. That is our direction of travel. That's what we need to do in the next period to make sure whatever comes next after this pandemic, if it hits the people of Merthyr Tydfil again, there's a better resilience in us being able to deal with it. So that in a nutshell is my pitch in terms of conveying to you what we try to build into the wellbeing agenda. And I'm sure you will all recognise those issues and the approach we've taken already, and some members will definitely be aware, pointing the entire borough at these issues holistically and galvanising us as one borough, such as the education approach we've taken, where we've built the RAR strategy, and it's everyone in the borough's challenge of education. It's not the Education Directorate on its own. It's a borough-wide challenge, the same that will be for the poverty agenda and the ill health agenda. So that's the way we're approaching it, collectively, holistically, and hopefully we'll get some traction and really address these issues for the public. I'll hand over to Al. Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to echo what Ellis said, I think as well as obviously being a once in a lifetime event, the pandemic really has highlighted that we have yet in South Wales and other parts of deindustrialised Britain actually broken the cycles of poverty which have existed since deindustrialisation, and it really has brought that home. So to be able to break those cycles, our strategic thinking and our strategic operational model going forward needs to actually stop it. We need to, through early years development, through the journey of our young residents through the education system into employment. We really need to change the way that we do things. And I think scrutiny and the governance of this organisation is critical to actually holding us on that path.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, so if there's nothing further, we'll go into questions. Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three. The first is on page 32, paragraph 3.4, last sentence. It says the engagement will start in the autumn winter of 2021. Do we know the start date?
Okay, if I can come in there, Councillor. We don't know the exact start date, but we are working with the regional team who have started some engagement already to develop the needs assessment. So the plan is to help support the delivery of that needs assessment and the engagement as part of that. We will then feed that into the corporate plan and do more specific local engagement if required on the back of that. So we haven't got an exact date at this point in time, but the work has started on a regional basis.
So it's obviously going to start within the next immediate few weeks, I would have thought.
Yes, Councillor.
Right. Then if you go to paragraph 5.2 on page 33, it refers there, Council follows a similar approach to that of Comtap-Maganac region in developing its plan. This means that engagement with the community will be carried out and data analysed to establish the need. This will include using data developed in the population needs assessment and well-being assessment. Does that include school children in that? I would say all school children, and perhaps particularly secondary school children.
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually, Councillor. And yes is the short answer, but the longer answer would be we're looking across various stakeholder groups, both in terms of demographic and geographic, and that so across all age groups, across all specific needs. And that will be reflected with both the engagement exercise and the data exercise. Now, inevitably, we'll find across Comtap-Maganac that there may be gaps in our data, but there are opportunities for us to analyse that data throughout the plan, not just at the start and at the end, but to make sure we capture the views of all. And going back to Ellis's point, it's imperative at this point that we make sure that we capture the needs of the Comtap, particularly following the pandemic. So myself and Alan were in a meeting this morning where there's a definite understanding now of the need to assess our data and engage with our communities to fully understand that position.
So in the case of school children, you will be liaising in the first instance, I presume, with the schools.
Yeah, that'll probably be done then through Sue's team, Sue Walker, Chief Officer for Education, and through the regional work that's being carried out as well. Okay,
thank you. The next question is on the paragraph below that, 5.3. It's on the top of the page 34. It reads, the top of it, broadly speaking, lessons learned have been around ensuring engagement with hard-to-reach groups is done, and a variety of questions are asked through different channels to capture people's views. Now, I think I know which are the hard-to-reach groups. Could you give myself and other members of the Scrutiny Committee an example of one or two of the hard-to-reach groups?
That's an excellent question, Councillor. Right, and we had the debate around that in the regional team meeting last week, actually. And the difficulty is there was an assumption made. Let's go back a step. There was an assumption made that because people turned up for the consultation event, they were able to be reached. Now, that's great from one point of view. However, we're not going to know if they're not there. So the issue around loneliness, for example, where people can't get to these kind of events, so we can't make any assumptions. And something we have looked at is when people fill in these surveys or attend these meetings, is for them to fill in the area they come from via their postcode, so we can start to understand the location where people attend these meetings from. Now, the reason why they're hard to reach groups is because people haven't quite cracked that nut yet. And that's a piece of work that we are engaging with on a regional basis to start to understand that. So what we are looking at is across our stakeholder groups, across our geographic, and we're identifying gaps as we progress. But in terms of an example of a hard to reach group, I suppose it would be those that can't get access to transport, that have to use public transport, that use a service which is run out of core hours, so an evening service. So therefore, they won't be able to access the transport to be able to get there. So that would be an example of a hard to reach group, and that could cut across various different services. Going back to the library service earlier, I mean, if the libraries were to close at a certain time or be in a location people couldn't get to, obviously those groups would be a hard to reach group. So I can't give you a definitive list, but as we go through the exercise, it's getting a better understanding of what those groups are, but liaising with those key stakeholders to find out and making no assumptions.
Yeah, and you know, the general public have to understand, which I presume you're all having to explain all the time, as to why we have to put together this corporate wellbeing plan and its objectives, because it sounds dull and bland when you say that statement, but this is a really, really important plan. So I presume all the time you're having to explain to the public why we got to get to grips with this.
Yeah, but again, in my experience, right, and I'm working with colleagues across the screen here, I think the idea is to keep it simple. And going back to Alice's point right at the beginning, we need to understand the needs of our community. So it's more important to listen when we engage, and then we take that learning away. And again, I go back to it, try not to make assumptions and try to understand what the need of our community is.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Lee Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just following on from Clive's questions, really. I'd just like to know a bit more about how you're going to consult locally with communities and the hardest to reach, and what tools you're going to be using. You know, I'm working with people who are socially isolated, disabled. What partners you're going to work with locally to engage with, you know, those hardest to reach.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So to address that, Al, do you want to come in first? But if you've got your hand up there, or
yeah, thanks. I think this is going to be the critical issue, Lee, in the success of this part of the exercise. Obviously, we've got traditional channels of communication, which we've gone through for years and years. Social media in its various aspects, I think, is critical. But ideally, myself and Andrew have discussed over the last couple of weeks in putting together a consultation team, which consists of a wider range of partner organisations and departments, so that we can actually analyse what we need to do to reach those harder to reach communities. Now, obviously, you've worked in you've worked on the Gurnus and Garnica for many years now, Lee, and it's going to be essential that we engage with organisations such as the ones that you work with and you are working with. I think one that we've missed a lot in consultation as well is some of the schools in hardest to reach areas, especially then accessing the parents in a different way. And I don't know if you remember that very successful project that ran, it must have been about 10 years ago now, School Gates, where it was basically community development around engaging with parents, going back and forth to schools. There's lots of different ways I think we can look at a suite of measures. But we'd really welcome that debate with professionals like yourselves and other colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Al. Yeah, I'd be happy to be involved and help in any way I can. I think, you know, contacting the schools and the parents, School Gates was a great project. There's lots of things, you know, Claire's here from Merthyr Valley's Homes as well, contacting the RSLs and getting their support and engaging with them, I think would be really good as well. But happy to be involved any way I can.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Is there anything else, Lee?
No, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, Gethin?
Yes, I'm just wondering, how easy will it be to measure the success of the plan and to report back to members, say, annually on the successes, and indeed, for that matter, the failures, if any?
Who wants to take that one?
Do you want me to start, Andrew, and then you come in?
Yeah, go on then, Alice.
So yeah, thanks for that question. The part of the challenge we've got is to improve our overall performance management within the authority anyway, and the transparency of it. So we are looking at various measures internally in terms of how we capture that distance travelled and monitor our performance, or such as a corporate dashboard. We want to look at, I mean, in some of the issues we touched on there, actually creating a borough-wide dashboard, so of what we would see as the key data sets that portray the health of the borough in terms of literacy levels, employment levels, unemployment levels, you know, so to be able to keep an eye on it and oversight as we go. But if there are issues that we need to report back on where there's bumps in the road or failures, then obviously we do that both to Scrutiny and council as we go. So but that is the general, in an improvement of our governance, which is built into the RTI plan. The transparency of the performance is something we're trying to address and improve.
Okay. Any other questions? Or did Andrew want us to add anything to that question, Andrew?
Just very briefly, Chair, if I may, we'll also have the opportunity annually to produce the self-assessment report to various committees and obviously to council, which will pick up a lot of what's been discussed there under the new legislation of the Local Government and Elections Act. So year 1 and 2 of the next corporate plan will be picked up in that way. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Okay. Any other questions before we move to comments? No? Okay, if we go to comments. No comments? I've just got a few just to sum up, guys, if nobody else has. So just as a suggestion, really, and I'm sure Andrews probably thinks I'm like a broken record because I know we've spoken at length about it before. So yeah, it's just in my mind, I've always imagined, and it would be lovely to see one day if I'm not elected again, I might pop into Tesco's or outside school and see it happening. That would be quite nice. But I've always imagined a Scrutiny being alongside these consultations. So if you've got one sort of table where you're consulting on the plan, you've got an entirely separate table with Scrutiny. So, you know, I imagine that these consultation events, very often people will get quite heated and they may go off on several different tangents. And it's always seemed to me that that's the perfect opportunity to send them over to Scrutiny, and then Scrutiny pick up the public opinion that way, because it's one of the things we don't do so well. We don't interact with the public, and we need to raise the profile of Scrutiny. So I would urge that any sort of consultation events is take the Scrutiny colleagues along with you, you know, and get them, signpost people to us. You know, if they've got gripes and concerns and complaints, then it's the perfect place to do them. So that's one thing I would like to see in the future. And I also made a note really about, I think Councillor Jones touched on it and Councillor Davis had touched on it, and I'd also had it on my notes around venues. You know, instead of expecting people to come to us, let us go to the people. So go to places where we know they're going to be regardless. People always manage to get to the supermarket, mostly. People tend to go to, even grandparents and parents always have to go to school to do the school run. So let's go to the people rather than them come to us. And then finally, Ellis, in terms of measuring outcomes and impact, you couldn't learn more about that than if you worked in collaboration with our lovely third sector partners, because they could teach you a thing or two on that, I'm sure. So so that was just my observations and summing up. So yeah, thank you guys. Andrew, did you want to come in and say anything?
Welcome all of those comments, Chair, and we'll build them into the plans.
Lovely, thank you. And I think, is that it, guys? I think that's everything. Well, thank you all. It's nice to see you all, and congratulations on your new position, Alan.
Thank you very much, Chair.
That's a lovely little panel we've got there, the three of you all together. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks, guys. Are you staying? Are you any of you staying, or are you off?
I'm going.
Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Right.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
Chair.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 5, which is the committee work programme, pages 41 to 58 of the report. Obviously, we need to review the work programme each time because it is a movable feast, and it does tend to be very fluid. So just to touch on what we've got arranged for the next meeting, and that is the healthy organisations and the corporate consultation and engagement process. So for anybody that just needs to be reminded, the healthy organisations is the one that we kept bringing forward, and we tried to do it a couple of times, and it's broadly around HR, but we're calling it healthy organisations now. But it's not a new thing, it's certainly something we're just revisiting. And then finally, the corporate consultation and engagement was the one that we raised last time, if people remember. We were quite keen to get that on the agenda ASAP. And also we've included this time with the reports the Cabinet Forward Work Programme, because we agreed that we wanted to start having a quick look at the Forward Work Programme, only on the basis of not scrutinising necessarily, but just on the basis of determining whether there's anything in there coming up that we need to flag up for us as a committee. So that's sort of the introduction. So if I could take you to a recommendation, bear with me a second. 2.1, and that is that we consider the attached draft forward work programme and approve, revise or amend as deemed appropriate. So with that, are there any questions? Clive?
Chair, are we going to include in the next meeting what we discussed in the pre-meeting about the
Yes, well, I'm glad you raised it, Clive, because originally I had planned on raising it under the actions to carry forward, but yeah, it makes sense to raise it now, actually. So for anybody that couldn't make the pre-meeting, one of the actions that was incomplete, most of them it's lovely to see all green, they're all being completed, but there was one that had been brought forward and discussed at length. So I wanted to get it resolved, and that was what we're doing about the one-stop shop being open to the public. So what we agreed in the pre-meeting was that, look, let's just get a report on what the delays have been, what the rationale's been for staying closed so long, and what are the future plans. So we are going to put that on for the next meeting. We agreed that in the pre-meeting, so unless anyone's got any major objections, we'll make sure we get that sort of done sooner rather than later. That was it, Clive. That was the gist of it, wasn't it, I think?
That is correct. It's gone round the houses with this one.
Yeah.
And as you say, we want a report so that we know what are the plans on there are no plans to reopen, the reasons for it, etc.
Yeah, okay. So any other questions on the work plan, guys? Are you happy with how it's looking? Because this is, you know, I've met with Maria again recently and we've sort of rejigged everything. So the one you see attached to this report is the most up-to-date one with everything sort of slotted in. Is everybody happy with it?
Seems fine to me, Chair.
And is there anything on there in terms of the Cabinet Forward Work Programme? Does anybody want to flag anything up in terms of what we might need to be looking at? I know it wasn't at the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. I don't think we attached it to the actual report, but it did come in the email.
Chair, just to be just to confirm, the current Q2 Cabinet Forward Plan ran up until the 8th of September.
Okay.
And the next one is due 2 weeks before the start of the next quarter. So it'll be around the end of this week.
Okay, the one that is being published, Maria?
Yeah, the Q3 is due to be published now around the end of this week. As soon as I see it being published,
okay,
I'll download it and send it out to members for information.
Yeah, and what I would ask members to do then is, can you get into the habit of just quickly scanning it for me, guys, just to see if there's anything on there that you feel, because obviously we need to be, you know, in an ideal world, we want things to be going through scrutiny. We want to be holding Cabinet to account. We want to be doing our function correctly. So if you see anything on that forward work programme that sort of raises red flags, or you've got questions, or you think that would benefit from the scrutiny process, please let me know. I can see Claire's hand up. Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just double check on the email where that information was sent around, please? Because either I've missed it or I haven't received it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Maria,
that is the original email where I sent out Q2. Was the first week of July.
Thank you. I'll check on that one.
And obviously, Claire, Maria will make sure that that you get the new quarter for us as well. So yeah, if everybody can just keep an eye out for that and then feed in any observations, and I'll make sure then that they're picked up within the work programme. Yeah. Okay. Any comments on the work programme, guys? No. Okay, so moving on. Was that a legacy hand then, Claire, or did you still have it up for comments?
Sorry, it was a legacy hand.
That's okay, no worries. Okay, so item number 6 is scrutiny referrals, feedback and follow-up actions. Well, we have actually touched on follow-up actions. The only one that was outstanding is that one we literally just discussed. So we've now actioned that one as well. Maria, I'm just trying to think now whether there was, I haven't made any notes. I haven't noted any follow-ups from today, apart from there was the one where we're going to email Jane the questions from Gethin, and also send that to Claire as well as the co-optee, so we can bring them up to date on the public libraries report. But is there any other actions from today's meeting?
My notes, Chair, because I write copious notes. So yeah, the only one that I've highlighted as an immediate action was the action with sending the information out to Jane, and also sending out the forward work plan for Cabinet when Q3 is made available.
Yeah.
Let me just check. I can't.
And of course that report as well, Maria.
Yes, yeah, that'll fall under the work programme item. So I've made a note that that needs to be added to the work programme, and then I can issue the request to the relevant officer.
Lovely. Clive?
Yeah, can I make a suggestion? The questions that Gethin's going to send in now, and that's going to have answers, can the whole committee be copied in to that so that we're up to speed with everything?
Yeah, there's no reason not to, Clyde. The only reason I didn't suggest that is because a lot of it we would have covered in previous years, you know, so we
Yeah.
touched on it today. So, for example, it wasn't until we started talking actually that it triggered my memory. So, for example, where Gethin was on about comparatives, we've done a lot of the comparatives in previous reports. But yeah, of course, we've got nothing to hide, and you know, it doesn't hurt to sort of have a little reminder. So yeah, Maria, let's just make it as for the committee. So
Yeah,
for
happy
anybody
to do
who's,
that.
yeah, for anybody who's interested, they can just tap into it then. Lovely.
Yep.
Okay. Is that everything on item number 6? Yeah, no comments, nothing? Okay. Item number 7, reflection and evaluation of the meeting. I think that it was a good one. I think that we stayed on point today, which was really good. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. I don't have any other business on item number 8. So yeah, that's it from me. Unless anybody's got any comments, I shall bid you goodbye and see you all soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care all.